The man I loved died on the way home from our wedding, but my mind refused to let him go. For 42 years, I lived beside a ghost. And when I finally died, I woke up in another world where he was waiting for me again. Westbridge University looked less like a school and more like a place where rich parents dumped their emotionally constipated children to learn business jargon and cocaine etiquette. Kael Mercer hated it instantly, especially the law students. They walked around campus dressed like tiny divorced businessmen carrying trauma in leather briefcases. Kael sat on the fountain edge outside the humanities building, chewing cheap gum while glaring at the crowd like someone owed him money. Technically, several people did. "You skipped economics again," Maya said, dropping beside him. "I attended spiritually. You threw a paper airplane at the professor. He caught it. Participation happened." Maya rubbed her face. "One day you're getting expelled. One day I'm dying dramatically in a parking lot. Let me enjoy the journey." That was when shouting erupted near the central stairs. Kael turned. 3 business majors surrounded a freshman boy against the railing. The smallest one looked terrified. The tallest rich idiot shoved the freshman again. "I said move." Kael sighed deeply. Human beings. Nature's least impressive group project. He stood. Maya grabbed his sleeve immediately. "No. Yes. You promised me no fighting this week. I promised no stabbing. That is not better." Too late. Kael crossed the courtyard with murder already glowing in his eyes. "Hey," he called lazily. The group turned. Kael pointed at the tallest guy. "You look like your father introduces himself by net worth." The freshman nearly choked. The rich boy frowned. "Who the hell are you?" "Local disappointment." "Move." The guy laughed and shoved Kael lightly. Very lightly. Unfortunately for him, Kael Mercer had the emotional regulation of a lit match near gasoline. Kael punched him immediately. The courtyard exploded. Students screamed. Someone pulled out a phone. The rich boy stumbled backward, clutching his nose, while Kael tackled another one into a bench hard enough to crack wood. "You insane bastard." "Yes," Kael snapped. "Next question." A fist flew toward him. Kael ducked smoothly and slammed his elbow into the guy's ribs. Then suddenly, a hand wrapped around Kael's wrist mid-swing. Strong. Cold. Still. The entire courtyard went silent. Kael looked up. Adrian Vale stood beside him in a perfectly pressed black coat, expression calm enough to belong at a funeral instead of a campus brawl. Tall. Sharp-faced. Dark eyes unreadable. The kind of handsome that looked expensive. Kael hated him on sight. "Let go," Kael said. Adrian studied the bleeding rich kid on the ground. Then the shattered bench. Then Kael. "You throw punches before conversations," Adrian said quietly. Kael yanked his wrist free. "Conversations are slower." One of the injured boys immediately pointed at Kael. "He attacked us." Adrian glanced at them once. "Were you harassing the freshman?" Silence. Interesting silence. Adrian nodded faintly like he already knew. Then he looked at the crowd filming. "Delete the videos." Nobody argued. Which told Kael everything. Money. Power. Fear. Cute combination. Kael scoffed. "What are you, Batman with a trust fund?" A few students gasped. Maya whispered from somewhere behind, "Please stop speaking." Adrian's mouth twitched slightly. Not a smile. Almost worse. "You're Kael Mercer," Adrian said. "And you're creepy for knowing that. You punched a professor last semester." He touched my shoulder aggressively. "That's not a legal phrase." "It should be." The injured rich boys quickly escaped while campus security finally arrived too late to matter. Useless as usual. Humanity's decorative furniture. Adrian looked at Kael one more time before turning away. "You should ice your knuckles," he said. Kael blinked. "That's your goodbye?" "You seem difficult to kidnap politely." Then Adrian walked away. Kael stared after him. Maya slowly approached. "Did Adrian Vale just flirt with you?" Kael snorted. "That man has the emotional range of a marble countertop." Unfortunately, he kept thinking about him anyway. 3 weeks later, Kael accidentally ended up in Adrian's apartment. Accidentally, meaning he followed Maya to a study session for free food and discovered Adrian sitting at the dining table wearing glasses, which honestly felt illegal. Kael dropped into a chair across from him. You live like a serial killer who respects interior design. The apartment was spotless. Dark wood, floor-to-ceiling windows. Silence heavy enough to hear breathing. Adrian didn't even look offended. You broke into the chemistry building last year. I was curious. You released lab mice. They yearned for freedom. Maya whispered. Please marry already so society can suffer properly. Kael threw a chip at her. Adrian calmly caught it without looking. Annoying rich bastard. Hours passed strangely fast after that. Kael expected Adrian to be arrogant. Instead he was patient. Sharp. Quietly funny in the driest possible way. When Kael insulted a corrupt politician on television, Adrian murmured, careful. That man donates buildings. Kael snorted. Then he can donate himself into traffic. Adrian actually laughed. Small. Real. It hit Kael harder than expected. Later that night, rain hammered against the windows while Maya left to answer a phone call. Kael wandered toward Adrian's bookshelf. You actually read all these? Yes. Voluntarily. Adrian stepped beside him. You sound horrified. I thought rich people just bought books for decoration. I thought you only communicated through threats. Kael grinned. I contain layers. You contain criminal charges. Potentially. Their eyes met. Something shifted. Dangerously. Kael looked away first. Bad idea. Very bad idea. Because Adrian Vale was beautiful up close. Not soft beautiful. Controlled beautiful. The kind that looked terrifying when angry. Kael suddenly understood why people avoided him. Not because Adrian was loud. Because he wasn't. You're staring, Adrian said quietly. You're unfortunately symmetrical. Adrian's expression softened almost invisibly. Then Maya returned before the atmosphere could become illegal. Cowardice saved civilization once again. The rumors started 2 months later. Kael and Adrian together. At first people laughed. Impossible pairing. The university prince and the scholarship delinquent. Then someone saw Adrian waiting outside Kael's literature lecture in the rain holding coffee. Then someone saw Kael asleep on Adrian's shoulder in the library. Then came the fight. A senior mocked Kael openly at a campus gala. Careful, Vale, the guy sneered. Strays bite. Kael stood immediately. Adrian stood faster. The room froze. Adrian adjusted his cufflinks slowly before speaking. If you mention him again, he said calmly, I'll bankrupt your father before breakfast. Silence. Absolute silence. Kael stared at him. The senior turned pale. And Adrian simply took Kael's hand and walked him out of the ballroom. Outside, cold air slapped Kael awake. What the hell was that? He asked. Adrian looked genuinely confused. An appropriate response. You threatened economic murder. He insulted you. Kael barked out a laugh. Then suddenly stopped laughing because Adrian was still holding his hand. Firm. Certain. Like it belonged there. You're insane, Kael murmured. Adrian stepped closer. Only about you. Kael's heartbeat stumbled. Disgusting. Romance really was just mutual psychological damage with better lighting. Adrian touched Kael's cheek gently. No hesitation. No shame. I love you, Adrian said quietly. Simple words. World-ending effect. Kael stared at him for a long moment before muttering. You picked the worst possible person. Adrian's eyes softened. I know. And God help him, Kael kissed him anyway. Dating Adrian Vale felt a little like adopting a tiger. Most of the time he was calm, elegant, terrifyingly composed. Then somebody upset Kael, and suddenly Adrian started discussing financial destruction like a hobby. Kael found it deeply romantic. Concerning but romantic. You know, normal couples watch movies together, Maya said while watching Adrian read through legal documents beside Kael on the dorm couch. Kael shrugged. We also do that. Adrian flipped a page calmly. Last week he threw popcorn at the screen because the protagonist made poor decisions. The man faked his death instead of communicating. You screamed for 20 minutes. I stand by it. Maya pointed at Adrian. And you just sat there staring at him like he invented oxygen. Adrian didn't deny it, which honestly should have worried society more. Kael kicked Maya lightly. Get out. You're disgusting together. You're single and bitter. I'm leaving before one of you starts reciting poetry. The door slammed behind her. Silence settled. Warm silence. The kind Kael never thought he'd have in life. Adrian reached over without looking and pulled Kael's legs across his lap automatically. Like habit. Like home. Kael stared at him for a second. Dangerous thing, tenderness. It sneaks up on people stronger than knives. You're staring again, Adrian murmured. You moisturize. It's suspicious. I'm dating a man who starts fights recreationally. Self-defense cardio. Adrian's hand slid absently over Kael's knee. Small touch. Soft touch. Kael felt it everywhere anyway. Pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. The first time Kael met Adrian's parents ended exactly how everyone expected. Poorly. The Vale estate looked less like a home and more like a museum dedicated to generational trauma. Huge chandeliers. Cold marble floors. Staff members moving silently like ghosts. Kael hated it before sitting down. Adrian's mother smiled the way rich people did when imagining your funeral. Kael, she said smoothly, we've heard quite a lot about you. That usually means something bad. Across the table, Adrian hid amusement behind his wine glass. His father spoke next. Direct. Sharp. Businesslike. You're on scholarship. Kael leaned back casually. Terrifying, I know. Education. You have no family. Nope. Very efficient during holidays. Your record includes assault. That one's fair. Kael, Adrian warned quietly. Kael pointed lightly. See? He supports honesty. Mrs. Vale set down her fork with precise irritation. You don't seem concerned about your future. Kael smiled thinly. Lady, I spent half my childhood wondering if the electricity would survive winter. Your son is the first future I've ever had. Silence. Adrian's gaze shifted instantly toward Kael. Something softer. Something almost aching. Mrs. Vale recovered first. Our son requires stability. Kael snorted. Your son threatened to ruin a politician because they interrupted our lunch. That politician was corrupt. Kael turned toward her innocently. See. Stable. Adrian actually choked on his drink. Tiny victory. Then Mr. Vale finally said the real thing. The ugly thing. One day Adrian must marry appropriately. The Vale family line cannot end. The air changed instantly. Kael felt it. That old familiar humiliation crawling under skin. Poor boy. Outsider. Temporary thing. He looked down briefly before forcing a grin. Good news then. I'm very killable. Kael, Adrian said sharply. What? Your father's basically interviewing replacement husbands already. Mrs. Vale sighed tiredly. You misunderstand. This is not personal. Kael laughed once. Cold. It's always personal when rich people decide who deserves love. The dinner collapsed after that. Voices rising. Adrian defending him immediately. His father growing angrier. His mother calling the relationship selfish. Kael finally stood. You know what's funny? He snapped. You people keep acting like Adrian belongs to your bloodline before he belongs to himself. Enough, Mr. Vale said coldly. No, Adrian said. The room froze. Adrian stood slowly beside Kael. Calm. Controlled. Dangerous. If you insult him again, Adrian said quietly, I leave this house permanently. His mother stared at him. For him. Adrian answered instantly. Yes. Kael's chest hurt suddenly. Terrible timing for emotions. Human hearts truly are useless little drama queens. The attacks became subtler after that. Internship offers disappearing. Scholarship reviews suddenly delayed. Rumors spreading across campus. Gold digger. Attention seeker. Social climber. Kael fought every single one. Literally sometimes. One business student mocked Adrian openly during lunch. Must be embarrassing, the guy sneered. Dating charity work. Kael launched across the table before logic could arrive. Chairs crashed. Someone screamed. Adrian grabbed Kael around the waist while the other guy bled dramatically onto expensive pasta. You can't keep committing violence every time someone insults you, Adrian muttered while dragging Kael away. Kael struggled furiously. He called me charity work. You broke his nose. He still has another one. Adrian pressed his face briefly into Kael's hair. And suddenly his voice turned soft. Dangerously soft. I don't care what they say. Kael stopped moving. Adrian pulled back slightly, eyes steady. You are the best thing in my life. That should not have worked so well. Kael hated that it did. You're really bad at choosing people, he muttered weakly. Adrian kissed his forehead. I know. Winter arrived hard that year. Cold winds. Gray skies. And another disastrous Vale family dinner. This one ended with Mrs. Vale finally snapping. You cannot build a future like this, she shouted. What happens in 10 years? 20. What about children? What about heirs? Kael went still. Very still. Adrian immediately noticed. Mother, he warned. But Kael laughed lightly first. Too lightly. Actually, Kael said, sipping wine, I already solved that problem. Everyone looked at him. Kael grinned lazily. If I were an Omega from one of those trashy novels, I'd just pop out a baby and everybody could calm down. Nobody spoke. Kael kept smiling anyway. Tragic news, though, he added quietly. I'm just a guy with anger issues. Something in Adrian's expression cracked. Tiny crack. Painful crack. Because they both knew. Kael would have done it. For him. If he could. Mrs. Vale looked away uncomfortably. Even she seemed ashamed. Adrian suddenly stood. We're leaving. Adrian, his father warned. No. The single word cut through the room like ice. Adrian took Kael's hand firmly and walked out without another glance. The moment they reached the car, Kael burst out laughing. Loud. Unhinged. Adrian stared at him. What's funny? Your mother looked like she saw a ghost. You joke when hurt. I joke when breathing. Adrian's jaw tightened. Then suddenly he grabbed Kael's face and kissed him hard. Fierce. Desperate. Like trying to silence every cruel word ever thrown at him. When they finally pulled apart, Kael's breathing shook slightly. You know, he murmured, you could still dump me and marry some rich girl. Adrian looked genuinely offended. I'd rather set myself on fire. Romantic. I'm serious. I know. That was the problem. Adrian rested his forehead against Kael's. Snow drifted quietly around them. And for one fragile moment, the world felt small enough to survive. Then Adrian whispered, Let's leave. Kael blinked. What? After graduation. We marry quietly. We leave the country. Start over somewhere no one knows us. Kael stared at him. The idea hit like sunlight through broken windows. Impossible. Beautiful. Terrifying. You'd abandon everything? He asked softly. Adrian smiled faintly. You are everything. Kael kissed him before his stupid heart exploded dramatically in public. Somewhere far behind them, inside that massive empty mansion, Adrian's parents watched the car disappear into the snow. And for the first time in years, fear finally settled into their bones. Because they realized something too late. If pushed hard enough, their son really would leave them forever. Spring arrived with terrible timing. Trees bloomed. Students flirted irresponsibly in public. Graduation approached. And Kael Mercer developed the deeply unfortunate habit of imagining a future. A dangerous hobby. One minute he would be walking across campus laughing at someone's terrible haircut, and suddenly his brain whispered, what if this is real? What if mornings stayed warm? What if Adrian always reached for his hand? What if love didn't disappear the moment life noticed him smiling? Disgusting thoughts. Absolutely horrifying. Kael blamed romance. And capitalism. Mostly capitalism. You're smiling again, Maya said suspiciously. Kael immediately scowled. Lies. You look happy. Insulting accusation. She folded her arms. You're planning something. Before Kael could respond, familiar footsteps approached. Steady. Measured. Annoyingly attractive. Adrian appeared beside them carrying coffee. Without asking, he handed Kael the exact drink he liked. Extra sugar. Less bitterness. Like the universe briefly apologized for existing. Kael narrowed his eyes. You memorize disturbing things. You pretend not to enjoy being taken care of. Maya gagged loudly. Please stop. You people act married already. Kael and Adrian exchanged a glance. Then looked away. Which told Maya everything. Oh my God. Kael pointed at her immediately. No. You are getting married. Shut up. You're actually doing it. Adrian calmly sipped coffee. Court marriage. Maya screamed. 3 students turned around. Kael buried his face in his hands. Human beings truly made joy embarrassing for no reason. The plan became simple. Graduate. Sign papers quietly. Leave. No giant ceremony. No family politics. No endless humiliation. Just them. Kael loved the simplicity of it. Maybe too much. He started imagining stupid things. A tiny apartment somewhere cold. Burnt breakfast because Adrian looked too distracting to focus. Arguments over groceries. Fighting strangers together. Growing old enough to complain about young people while secretly becoming worse. Terrifyingly domestic. One evening Kael lay across Adrian's couch while Adrian worked through emails. Rain tapped softly against the windows. You know, Kael said lazily, if we leave the country, I'm absolutely becoming unemployed for at least 6 months. No. Yes. You'll get bored in 3 days. I'll become mysterious. You'll start fights in grocery stores. Kael pointed proudly. See. You know me. Adrian finally closed his laptop. Something serious settled into his expression. Dangerous expression. Quiet expression. The one that usually preceded emotional damage. I bought rings. Kael sat up immediately. You what? Adrian opened a small black box. Simple silver bands. Nothing flashy. Nothing dramatic. Just clean, steady warmth. Kael suddenly forgot how speaking worked. Which was rude. He enjoyed speaking. Usually loudly. They're temporary, Adrian said quietly. Until you choose something better. Kael stared too long. Long enough his throat hurt. You idiot, he muttered eventually. Adrian blinked. That sounded emotional. You're emotional. You're crying. Kael touched his face. Moisture. Traitorous moisture. Unacceptable. I hate you. You love me. Unfortunately. Adrian leaned forward and kissed his forehead gently. Tender. Easy. Like forever could fit into tiny things. You never have to fight alone again, Adrian whispered. That almost broke Kael. Because no one had ever said that before. Not once. 3 days later, Adrian's parents arrived uninvited. Naturally. Misery loves expensive tailoring. Kael opened Adrian's apartment door wearing sweatpants and irritation. Mrs. Vale froze slightly. Mr. Vale looked grim. You, Kael said. The seasonal villains. Adrian emerged behind him immediately. What are you doing here? His father's jaw tightened. We need to talk. No, Adrian answered. His mother stepped forward. Please. The word landed strangely. Soft. Tired. Kael exchanged a glance with Adrian. Eventually, reluctantly, they let them inside. Nobody sat comfortably. Nobody breathed normally. Kael stole fries from the kitchen out of spite. Finally, Mrs. Vale spoke. You're serious, she said quietly. Adrian didn't hesitate. Yes. You would truly leave? Yes. Silence stretched. Heavy. Ugly. Then something unexpected happened. Mrs. Vale looked at Kael. Actually looked at him. Not through him. Not around him. At him. You love him, she said softly. Kael frowned. What gave it away? The years of emotional warfare. Her mouth trembled slightly. Not anger. Regret. We handled this terribly. Adrian stiffened. His father sighed heavily. We thought this would pass, he admitted. A university relationship. Rebellion. Kael laughed once. You underestimated your son's terrible taste. Adrian squeezed his hand under the table. Mrs. Vale swallowed hard. If marriage is what you want. Adrian blinked. Kael nearly dropped a fry. We'll support it, she finished quietly. Silence. Complete silence. Even Kael's sarcasm went on vacation. You're joking, Kael said carefully. No. Mr. Vale rubbed tiredly at his forehead. You were right about one thing. Kael narrowed his eyes suspiciously. Only one. Adrian belongs to himself. Something tightened painfully in Kael's chest. Too late. Too painfully late. But still. Something. Adrian looked stunned. Actually stunned. Rare event. Like spotting emotional honesty in billionaires. His mother gave a small smile. We would like to attend. Kael blinked again. Then immediately said, You know I'm still rude, right? Unexpectedly, she laughed. Small laugh. Real laugh. At this point, she murmured, I think the family deserves it. The courthouse wedding happened a week later. Quiet. Private. Perfectly theirs. No grand ballroom. No society headlines. Just papers. Witnesses. A tiny bouquet Kael claimed looked aggressively cheerful. Kael wore black because white felt suspicious. Adrian wore gray. Calm. Beautiful. Impossible. Standing there beside him like reality forgot its own rules. You look nervous, Kael whispered. I'm marrying the love of my life. That sounds stressful. You threatened the clerk 10 minutes ago. He judged my handwriting. Adrian smiled. God. That smile. Kael decided immediately he would commit crimes for it. The officiant cleared his throat politely. Simple vows. Simple promises. But when Adrian slid the ring onto Kael's finger, his hands shook. Tiny tremble. Barely visible. Enough to shatter Kael quietly from the inside. I choose you, Adrian said softly. No performance. No audience. Just truth. In every life, Adrian added, voice low enough only Kael heard, I'd still choose you. Kael swallowed hard. Damn him. Damn him for sounding like destiny. Kael slid Adrian's ring on next. You're stuck with me now, he muttered. Adrian smiled faintly. Good. When the paperwork ended, Mrs. Vale cried. Mr. Vale awkwardly hugged Adrian like someone relearning fatherhood from scratch. And when Mrs. Vale hugged Kael too, she whispered shakily, Take care of him. Kael blinked, then answered honestly. Always. Their honeymoon flight left in 2 days. Just enough time to drive back home, pack, and finally disappear together. The sunset burned gold outside as Kael climbed into the passenger seat beside Adrian. His new husband. Ridiculous sentence. Absolutely ridiculous. Kael stared at the ring on his finger again. Warm metal. Proof. Real proof. Adrian glanced over. You're smiling. No, I'm not. You are. Mind your business, husband. Adrian laughed softly. Kael loved that sound more than breathing. The road stretched ahead. Quiet. Safe. Golden. Kael leaned back lazily. You know, he muttered. Maybe in another universe I actually am an Omega. Adrian smirked faintly. You'd be terrifying. I'd weaponize pregnancy. You already weaponize everything. Kael grinned. Outside, headlights flashed briefly in the distance. Far too bright. Far too fast. Neither of them noticed. Not yet. The truck ran the red light at 70 miles per hour. Later, witnesses would describe the crash differently. Too fast. Too sudden. Metal screaming. Glass exploding. One woman said the sound haunted her for months. Kael remembered none of it clearly. Only fragments. Adrian's hand jerking toward him. A violent impact. Pain. Then warmth running down his face. And Adrian saying his name. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just once. Like he was trying to hold on to him. Then darkness swallowed everything. When Kael woke up, the world smelled like antiseptic and grief. Machines beeped nearby. His ribs felt shattered. His head throbbed violently. For several seconds he stared at the ceiling blankly before memory returned all at once. Wedding. Crash. Adrian. Kael turned sharply. Adrian. No answer. Panic clawed instantly through his chest. He tried sitting up. Agony exploded through his body. A nurse rushed forward immediately. Sir, please don't move. Where's my husband? The woman froze. Tiny hesitation. Tiny, terrible hesitation. Kael's stomach dropped. Where's Adrian? The door opened behind her. Mrs. Vale stood there already crying. Mr. Vale looked 20 years older. Something cold slid slowly into Kael's bones. No. 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 Adrian promised. Adrian promised. Mrs. Vale stepped closer shakily. Kael. Kael stared at her. Then suddenly laughed weakly. Small broken sound. You look awful, he murmured. Did he yell at you again? Nobody answered. The silence became monstrous. Kael's breathing turned uneven. No, he whispered. Mrs. Vale broke completely. And somehow that hurt worse than anything. Because rich women like her weren't supposed to cry openly. Not like this. Not destroyed. Kael looked toward the empty side of the room again. Then back at them. Then quietly asked, Where is my husband? Mr. Vale's voice cracked. He died instantly. Everything stopped. The machines. The room. The air. Kael stared at him without blinking, like the words were spoken in another language. Then suddenly he smiled. Softly. Relieved. You're mistaken, he said. Mrs. Vale sobbed harder. Kael frowned slightly at her reaction. Adrian's fine, he repeated gently. We just got married. The doctors called it trauma-induced delusion. Severe psychological dissociation triggered by grief and brain injury. Kael called it annoying, because everyone kept insisting on impossible things. Like Adrian being dead. Ridiculous concept. Adrian sat beside his hospital bed every evening reading quietly while Kael complained about the food. Obviously alive. Obviously listening. These people are dramatic, Kael muttered one night while staring at the ceiling. Adrian glanced up from his book. They're worried about you. They keep crying. You almost died. Kael frowned. You're supposed to comfort me better. Adrian reached over and brushed fingers gently through his hair. Warm. Real. I'm here, Adrian whispered. Kael relaxed instantly. See? Fine. Everybody else was just emotionally unstable. Months passed. Kael physically healed. Mentally, the world remained split cleanly in two. In one world, Adrian was dead. Flowers covered a grave. The Vale family mourned endlessly. Doctors watched Kael with quiet pity. In Kael's world, they were newly married, planning their honeymoon, still laughing together, still in love. And honestly, Kael preferred his version. Reality had terrible writing choices. The Vale family brought Kael home eventually. Not to some separate guest house. Not to a hospital. Home. Mrs. Vale personally prepared his room beside Adrian's old one. At first Kael found that strange. Then he realized she liked hearing him talk. About Adrian. About imaginary conversations. About the future that no longer existed. One afternoon Kael wandered into the kitchen barefoot while talking animatedly to empty air. I told you pineapple on pizza is psychological warfare, he argued. Mrs. Vale stood frozen by the counter watching him. Kael turned toward her casually. Adrian agrees with me. Her lips trembled. Yes, she whispered painfully. He would. Kael smiled and kept walking. After he disappeared upstairs, she finally collapsed into tears. Again. Always crying now. Humans really were 90% water and emotional damage. Years passed strangely. Kael never fully left his illusion. Therapy helped him function. Helped him eat. Sleep. Exist. But Adrian remained beside him in every moment. At university reunions, Kael still introduced Adrian casually. He hates these events, Kael would whisper conspiratorially. People smiled sadly. Nobody corrected him anymore. Even Mr. Vale stopped trying. Because every attempt shattered Kael for weeks. And because somewhere along the way, the family understood something unbearable. Kael had not survived the crash either. Not completely. Part of him remained trapped inside that ruined car forever beside Adrian. One winter evening nearly 15 years later, Kael sat beside the fireplace reading while Adrian rested nearby. Older now. Both of them older. At least in Kael's mind. Mrs. Vale entered quietly carrying tea. Her hair had gone mostly white. Grief aged people cruelly. "You're awake late," she said softly. Kael shrugged. "Adrian's working." Her eyes flickered toward the empty chair beside him. Still. Always still. She set down the tea carefully, then suddenly whispered, "I'm sorry." Kael looked up. Mrs. Vale's eyes filled with tears immediately. "For all of it," she choked out. "Every cruel thing I said to you. Every moment we made him choose." Kael stared at her silently, then looked toward Adrian. Adrian watched him quietly, gentle as ever. Kael sighed. "You know," he murmured, "he really loved you." That broke her completely. "I know." "No," Kael said softly. "You don't." The room shook with silence. Then Kael smiled sadly. "He spent years trying to make peace between us because he wanted everyone together at the end." Mrs. Vale covered her mouth. Kael leaned back slowly. He got his wish eventually, just not in the way anyone wanted. Time kept moving anyway. Cruel thing. It never cared who got left behind. Kael grew older. Lines formed around his eyes. His hands became rougher. His hair silvered slowly. But every morning, Adrian still kissed his forehead before breakfast. Every night, Adrian still slept beside him. Invisible to everyone else. Perfectly real to Kael. Sometimes strangers stared when Kael spoke to empty air in public. Sometimes children whispered. Sometimes nurses looked sad. Kael never cared, because Adrian answered him. Always. Near the end, Kael became weaker quickly. His heart struggled. Breathing hurt. Mrs. Vale stayed beside him constantly now. An old woman carrying decades of regret. One rainy night, Kael lay in bed staring toward the window while thunder rolled softly outside. Adrian sat beside him quietly. Beautiful. Young again somehow. Like memory itself had smoothed away time. Kael smiled faintly. "You're glowing dramatically," he muttered. Adrian touched his cheek gently. "You're tired." "Little bit." Mrs. Vale slept nearby in a chair. Kael studied her for a long moment. "She loved you," he whispered. "I know. She loved me too eventually." Adrian smiled softly. "I know." Kael closed his eyes briefly. Pain faded strangely. Warmth spread through him slowly. Like drifting. Like sinking into light. Then suddenly he laughed weakly. "What?" Adrian brushed their foreheads together. "You finally became old with me." Kael's chest tightened painfully. Because somehow that felt like goodbye. "No," he whispered immediately. "Stay." Adrian's expression broke for the first time in decades. Raw grief. Ancient grief. "I tried," he whispered back. Kael froze. The room suddenly felt wrong. The air shifted. Cracks spread through reality itself. And for the very first time in 40 years, Adrian looked transparent. Kael stared at Adrian in horror. Transparent. Fading. No. No, that was wrong. Adrian was real. Adrian had always been real. The room trembled around him strangely. The walls blurred at the edges. Rain sounded distant now, like water falling in another world. Kael pushed himself upright weakly. "Stop doing that." Adrian's eyes softened with unbearable sadness. "Kael, don't." Kael's breathing turned sharp. "Don't use that voice." The voice people used when things ended. The voice doctors used. The voice funeral homes used. Kael hated that voice. Mrs. Vale stirred awake nearby. "Kael." But Kael barely heard her. Because Adrian was fading more every second. Like smoke caught in light. Like memory finally losing the war against time. Panic crashed violently through Kael's chest. "You promised," he whispered. Adrian looked devastated. And suddenly Kael understood. Not fully. Not cleanly. But enough. Tiny shattered pieces finally connected inside his mind after 40 years of refusing truth hard enough to break reality itself. The crash. The blood. The empty hospital chair. The funeral he never attended. The grief everyone carried except him. Kael's hands started shaking. "No." Mrs. Vale hurried toward him immediately. "Kael, breathe." He looked at her. Really looked at her. Wrinkled hands. Exhausted eyes. Decades of sorrow carved into her face. Not temporary grief. Not fresh grief. A lifetime of it. Then Kael looked back toward Adrian again. Still there. Still beautiful. Still his. But fading. Kael's voice cracked horribly. I made you stay. Adrian smiled weakly. You were lonely. Kael broke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just one small shattered sound escaping his chest as 40 years of denial finally collapsed under its own weight. I couldn't. His breathing hitched violently. I couldn't survive it. I know. I tried not to remember. I know. Kael laughed helplessly through tears. You died and my brain said absolutely not. Adrian actually smiled at that. Tiny smile. Familiar smile. God, Kael loved that smile. Loved it enough to destroy reality for decades just to keep seeing it. Human beings were terrifying creatures when grieving. They could build entire worlds from refusal alone. Mrs. Vale quietly began crying behind him. Kael turned toward her slowly. And for the first time in 40 years, he finally asked the question honestly. How long has he been gone? Her face crumpled completely. 42 years. 42. 42 years talking to a ghost. 42 years loving someone so fiercely death itself couldn't fully take him away. Kael covered his eyes shakily. That's embarrassing, he whispered hoarsely. Mrs. Vale let out a broken laugh through tears. Even now he was still trying to make grief easier for other people. Kael looked back toward Adrian desperately. You stayed all this time? Adrian stepped closer. Or whatever ghosts did instead of stepping. You asked me to. Kael remembered suddenly. Fragments returning brutally. Hospital bed. Broken body. Begging Adrian not to leave. Again. 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 And maybe love was stubborn enough to answer. Kael's vision blurred heavily. His chest hurt less now. Actually, he couldn't really feel it anymore. Strange. Very strange. Mrs. Vale grabbed his hand tightly. Terrified. Kael. He looked at her quietly. Then smiled. Small. Gentle. The same way Adrian used to smile at him. You accepted me too late, he teased softly. She sobbed immediately. I know. But you did accept me. I loved you, she cried. Both of you. Kael squeezed her hand weakly. I know. And he did. That was the tragic thing. Love arrived eventually. Just slower than death. The room grew brighter. Not physically brighter. Something else. Something pulling. Kael looked toward Adrian again. Young. Whole. Waiting. Like the universe pressed pause just for them one last time. You know, Kael murmured weakly. This is still your fault somehow. Adrian raised an eyebrow. You punched at least 12 people defending me. Only 12. Possibly more. Kael smiled faintly. Then his expression cracked again. Raw fear slipping through. If I let go now. Adrian immediately took his hand. Warm. Real. Somehow real. You won't lose me. You died. And still came back. Kael stared at him. Then suddenly laughed softly through tears. That's annoyingly romantic. You loved it. I did. Mrs. Vale pressed trembling fingers against her mouth, watching him speak to empty air again. But this time, for the first time, the room no longer felt empty. Not to her. Maybe grief changed people. Maybe love lingered. Or maybe a mother who spent 40 years regretting cruelty earned one small miracle before the end. Because for just 1 second, she thought she saw someone standing beside Kael. Tall, dark-haired, gentle-eyed, and smiling at her sadly. Then thunder cracked outside, and the vision vanished. Kael's breathing weakened further. Slow now. Fading. Mrs. Vale leaned close immediately, terrified to lose him too. But Kael only looked peaceful. You should rest, she whispered shakily. Kael smiled. Nah, he murmured. I think I've slept long enough. Then he looked toward Adrian one final time, and softly said the words he should have said 42 years ago. You can stop staying now. Adrian's expression shattered completely, because even after all this time, Kael's first instinct was still protecting him, still loving him, still choosing him. Adrian leaned down slowly until their foreheads touched, and whispered, In every life. Kael closed his eyes, smiling. Then the monitors finally screamed. Darkness lasted only a moment. Then came scent. Warm. Sweet. Flowers. Smoke. Something unfamiliar wrapped around Kael violently. His body jerked upright, breathing hard. Noise exploded everywhere around him. Crowded streets. Voices. Wooden carts rolling across stone roads. Kael blinked rapidly. What the hell? His voice sounded younger. Completely younger. He looked down instantly. Different hands. Smaller waist. Long dark robes. And around him stretched an ancient city glowing beneath red lanterns and mountain mist. People moved past wearing traditional clothing. Some carried swords. Others whispered about alphas and omegas openly like it was normal. Kael stared blankly. Excuse me? Then suddenly, a scent hit him. Sharp. Cold. Dangerous. His heart stopped instantly. Across the crowded market, a man turned sharply. Tall. Black robes. Power coiled beneath stillness. Beautiful enough to ruin lives. And golden eyes widened in absolute horror. Adrian. No. Not Adrian. Someone else. Someone wearing Adrian's soul. The Alpha dropped the scroll in his hands. His breathing became uneven instantly, like recognition struck somewhere deeper than memory. Kael couldn't move. Neither could he. The entire noisy market faded around them. Then the Alpha whispered shakily. Kael? Kael's eyes burned immediately. You've got to be kidding me. The Alpha crossed the distance between them in seconds. Hands trembling. Eyes already red. Like he had been searching for centuries. Kael stared at him helplessly before laughing through tears. This universe really saw me mentally collapse for 40 years and said, Round 2. The Alpha pulled him into his arms desperately. And this time, Kael smelled rain, fire, and Alpha pheromones wrapping around him possessively. Real. Alive. Not a ghost. Not imagination. Real. Against his neck, the Alpha whispered brokenly. I found you again. Kael closed his eyes slowly, then muttered into his shoulder. You're still dramatic. The Alpha laughed shakily. And somewhere beyond worlds, beyond death, beyond grief itself, love finally arrived on time.